New features. The following list informs you about the most important improvements in Cubase and provides links to the corresponding descriptions. New features in version 12. Highlights. Razor plugin. Razor is a versatile limiter plugin that can increase the loudness of the audio material to a high extent. Its range goes from smooth limiting of solo tracks in full mixes to a rather aggressive limiting, best suited for percussive material. The plugin is described in the separate document plugin reference. See Razor. FX Modulator plugin. This new multi-effect modulation plugin combines several modulation effects that allow for extensive sound shaping, from classic ducking effects to exciting rhythmic patterns. You can create custom-shaped LFOs and modulate up to 6 integrated effect modules at once. The LFO can be triggered via MIDI or separate sidechain inputs, where the envelope of the sidechain signal is added to the LFO. The plugin is described in the separate document plugin reference. See FX Modulator. Verve. Verve is a felt piano with a beautiful and warm sound, enabling you to tell a new story with every single key you play. The VSD instrument is described in the separate document Verve. See Verve. Sample Accurate Volume Automation. The new Volume Automation Precision function allows for volume automation that is 100% sample accurate, regardless of the buffer size. You can set the number of samples after which a new volume automation event is processed. The automation curve between the processed events is interpolated. This smoothens transitions between automation events and prevents sudden jumps which may lead to crackles. See Audio System page. Editing workflow improvements. You can now freeze/unfreeze several tracks at once. See Freezing multiple tracks. The new Nudge Grid options let you edit independently from the project grid. This allows you to work with the musical bars plus beats grid for all mouse operations while fine-tuning positions and lengths of events and parts using Nudge key commands. See Setting up a snap grid for Nudge operations. You can now move event ends to the project cursor position. See Move submenu. When resizing events with the Object Selection tool, you can now automatically adapt the size of existing fades by using a tool modifier. See Resizing events with the Object Selection tool, Normal sizing. You can now assign key commands to slip event content operations. See Moving the contents of events. We have extended key command-based operations for creating and adjusting range selections. It is now possible to also increase/decrease the vertical direction to span range selections across multiple tracks. This way you can entirely rely on key command support to adjust and move a range selection in all 4 directions. See Adjusting the size of selection ranges. All fade-related commands are now gathered in a dedicated fade submenu in the audio menu, and the commands fade into range start and fade out from range end have been added. See Creating and editing fades with the range selection tool. Audio warp improvements. You can now perform phase-coherent audio warp operations for parts and events on all tracks within a folder track. See Group Editing Mode. The new free warp mode of the Time Warp tool allows you to perform quick warp operations by creating and editing warp markers on events in the project window. See Time Warp. You can now copy warp markers from a selected event to other events at the same time position. See Copying warp markers to other events. Scale Assistant for Vari Audio. Whether you want to get creative with melodies or correct the pitch of your recordings, the Scale Assistant in Vari Audio brings 2 powerful tools together to make pitch editing a breeze. Just set the scale and follow the chord track or let the Scale Assistant suggest the scale based on your recorded notes. You can then instantly quantize the pitch of your recording or snap the Vari Audio pitch editing to the scale. See Selecting a musical scale for Vari Audio segments. Permanently applying extensions. You can now permanently apply extension edits to audio events. See Permanently applying extension edits to audio events. You can now permanently apply extension edits to audio tracks. See Permanently applying extension edits to audio tracks. Sampler track improvements. You can now use your audio warp and quality settings for slice playback. See Playback section. Authoring for Dolby Atmos. Cubase now supports 2D channel configurations up to 7.1 and 3D channel configurations up to 7.1.4. See Available surround channel configurations. You can now create complete mixes with object-based audio content for Dolby Atmos without additional software or hardware. See Object Audio in Cubase. The Setup Assistant for Dolby Atmos Dialog helps you to set up a fully compliant Dolby Atmos project. The assistant allows you to add a main mix channel in a 3D channel configuration up to 7.1.4 to insert the renderer for Dolby Atmos plugin for monitoring, and to automatically route the existing tracks of your project to a bed group channel. This way you can set up a perfect starting point for creating mixes for Dolby Atmos in Cubase. See Setup Assistant for Dolby Atmos. The renderer for Dolby Atmos now offers a binaural downmix for monitoring Dolby Atmos mixes via headphones and allows you to measure the loudness of the renderer output signal. See Renderer for Dolby Atmos plugin panel. In the ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos window, you can configure objects and beds from existing tracks in the project and customize the object structure. See ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos window. Cubase allows you to export your own Dolby Atmos mixes as fully compliant audio definition model, ADM, files in broadcast wave format, BWF. See ADM files. MIDI remote integration. MIDI controllers are essential to every music production setup, and in Cubase, integrating them has reached a new level. Built around the new concept of MIDI remote scripts, Cubase will automatically detect your device and map the controls. If there is no script for your device yet, you can easily create your own with the MIDI controller surface editor. You can then conveniently connect controls and parameters with the mapping assistant. See MIDI remote. Logical editing improvements. The user interface and the layout of the track input transformer have been modernized and made consistent to the overall application look and feel, and the preset browser has been renewed. See Track Input Transformer. The user interface and the layout of the project input transformer have been modernized and made consistent to the overall application look and feel, and the preset browser has been renewed. See Project Input Transformer. The user interface and the layout of the logical editor have been modernized and made consistent to the overall application look and feel, and the preset browser has been renewed. See Logical Editor. The user interface and the layout of the project logical editor have been modernized and made consistent to the overall application look and feel, and the preset browser has been renewed. See Project Logical Editor. Creating chord events from audio events. You can now drop your audio recording on the chord track, and Cubase will lay out the chord progression for you. And if the detection does not match your scale, the chord assistant can suggest the nearest alternatives based on the following chords. See Creating chord events from audio events. Project Logical Editor pre- and post commands. Edit operations in the Project Logical Editor can now run commands and macros before and after the filters and actions. See Project Logical Editor pre- and post-process commands. New performance meter. The audio performance window now offers real-time, ASAU guard, and peak indicators. See audio performance window. More new features. Lin1 Dither plugin. Lin1 Dither is a dithering plugin that uses advanced algorithms and offers additional noise shaping to increase the apparent signal-to-noise ratio by altering the spectrum of the low-level audio signal. The plugin is described in the separate document plugin reference. See Lin1 Dither. Supervision plugin. The fully customizable multimeter audio analyzer comes with new modules: a classic VU meter, spectrum keyboard, balance, level histogram, and loudness histogram. The plugin is described in the separate document plugin reference. See Supervision. Step filter plugin with new randomized parameters. Step filter now allows you to apply a certain deviation of the bass cutoff and bass resonance parameters with each new cycle of the pattern. The plugin is described in the separate document plugin reference. See Step filter. Support for second video track. You can now use up to 2 video tracks in Cubase projects. This also enables you to import all video tracks from existing Nuendo projects. See video tracks. Importing tempo and signature tracks. You can now import tempo tracks and signature tracks from other projects or track archives. See track import from projects or track archives. Exporting selected events. Cubase now allows you to render selections or range selections of audio events and MIDI parts and export the rendered audio.wav files. See exporting selected events. Improved crossfade editor. The advanced crossfade editor offers more control, new operations, and advanced editing to help you create the perfect blend. See crossfade editor. Markers. The new markers window gives you a better overview of the markers used in your project and facilitates editing. See markers window. Fourth mix console window. You can now open up to 4 mix console windows in Cubase. See mix console. Increased number of VCA faders. You can now use a maximum amount of 256 VCA faders. See creating VCA faders in the mix console. Sample editor editing improvements. The sample editor toolbar now comes with several improvements for displaying, zooming, and editing clips and events. See sample editor toolbar. Extensions on audio track level. You can now apply array extensions at track level and conveniently edit all events within that track. See activating extensions for audio tracks. Mix Convert V6 supports LT/RT matrix encoding. You can now produce fully compatible Dolby Pro Logic 2 mixes with LT/RT matrix encoding, including 90 degrees phase shift of the surround channels. See Mix Convert V6 plugin panel. Last but not least, WinRT MIDI support. Cubase now supports the Windows Runtime MIDI API, WinRT MIDI, that allows for native support of Bluetooth MIDI in Windows, better plug and play, and better handling of multiple identical devices. See MIDI port setup page. Move the project cursor in fixed steps via key commands. You can now assign additional key commands that allow you to move the project cursor in fixed steps of 5S, 10S, and 20S, forward or backward. See setting the project cursor. Fades command extensions. You can now use default fades to create event-based fade-ins and fade-outs. See applying default fades. Improved silence detection. The new audition function allows you to directly preview any position in the analyzed audio event. Furthermore, you can apply fade-ins and fade-outs to the resulting audio events. See detect silence dialog. Event display improvements. You can now decide whether to append the clip name to the event name. See event display audio. New application scaling menu for native Windows scaling for high DPI. You can now scale the Cubase user interface relative to the Windows system scaling setting. See general. Introduction. Introduction. This is the operation manual for Steinberg's Cubase. Here you will find detailed information about all the features and functions in the program. New features. Platform independent documentation. Platform independent documentation. The documentation applies to the operating systems Windows and macOS. Features and settings that are specific to one of these platforms are clearly indicated. In all other cases, the descriptions and procedures in the documentation are valid for Windows and macOS. Some points to consider. The screenshots are taken from Windows. Some functions that are available on the File menu on Windows can be found in the Program Name menu on macOS. Introduction. PDF documents and online documentation. PDF documents and online documentation. The documentation consists of several documents. You can read them online or download them from Steinberg.help. You can reach Steinberg.help from the program by selecting Help, Cubase Help. Operation Manual. The main Cubase reference documentation with detailed descriptions of operations, parameters, functions, and techniques. Score layout and printing. Describes the professional music notation, score editing, and printing features included in the score editor. Plug-in reference. Describes the features and parameters of the included VST plugins, VST instruments, and MIDI effects. Remote control devices. Lists the supported MIDI remote control devices. MIDI devices. Describes how to manage MIDI devices and device panels. Groove Agent SE. Describes the features and parameters of the included VST instrument Groove Agent SE. HA Lion Sonic SE. Describes the features and parameters of the included VST instrument HA Lion Sonic SE. Retrologue. Describes the features and parameters of the included VST instrument Retrologue. Pad Shop. Describes the features and parameters of the included VST instrument Pad Shop. Verve. Describes the features and parameters of the included VST instrument Verve. Steinberg Library Manager. Describes how you can register and manage your VST sound libraries. Platform independent documentation. Documentation structure. Documentation structure. In our documentation, we divide information into 3 different types of topics according to their content. Descriptions of the user interface. Topics that describe the functionality of user interface items and list the options and settings of dialogues, panels, or other items. Descriptions of basic concepts. Topics that describe concepts and explain the functionality of a specific software feature. Descriptions of procedures. Topics that provide step-by-step instructions for how to perform a specific task. These topics often provide an example for why you might want to follow the steps and a brief summary of the result, including consequences to be aware of. Because of this division of information, our documentation structure functions as a reference you can consult for specific information or instructions as required, rather than a guide you must read from start to finish. Tip: descriptive topics do not describe how to perform a task, and procedural topics do not explain what something is. To find general information about items or concepts, we recommend searching for them by name, such as events. To find instructions for performing particular actions, we recommend including a relevant verb in your search, such as recording. Links at the bottom of topics guide you to further relevant content. You can also check the sidebar for nearby related topics in the documentation structure. PDF documents and online documentation. Conventions. Conventions. In our documentation, we use typographical and markup elements to structure information. Documentation structure. Typographical elements. Typographical elements. The following typographical elements mark the following purposes. Prerequisite. Requires you to complete an action or to fulfill a condition before starting a procedure. Procedure. Lists the steps that you must take to achieve a specific result. Important. Informs you about issues that might affect the system, the connected hardware, or that might bring a risk of data loss. Note. Informs you about issues that you should consider. Tip. Adds further information or useful suggestions. Example. Provides you with an example. Result. Shows the result of the procedure. After completing this task. Informs you about actions or tasks that you can perform after completing the procedure. Related links. Lists related topics that you can find in this documentation. Conventions. Markup. Markup. Bold text indicates the name of a menu, option, function, dialog, window, etc. Example. To open the Functions menu, click Functions menu in the top right corner of the mix console. If bold text is separated by a greater than symbol, this indicates a sequence of different menus to open. Example. Select Project, add track. Typographical elements. Key commands. Key commands. Many of the default key commands, also known as keyboard shortcuts, use modifier keys, some of which are different depending on the operating system. When key commands with modifier keys are described in this manual, they are indicated with the Windows modifier key first, followed by the macOS modifier key and the key. Example. Control/CMDZ means press Control on Windows or CMD on macOS, then press C. Markup. Setting up your system. Setting up your system. To use Cubase, you must set up your audio and, if required, your MIDI system. Key commands. Studio Setup Dialog. Studio Setup Dialog. The Studio Setup Dialog allows you to set up your connected audio, MIDI, and remote control devices. To open the Studio Setup Dialog, select Studio Setup. The following options are available in the Devices section to the left. Add device. Allows you to manually add devices such as a note expression input device, an additional time display device, or specific remote control devices. Remove. Allows you to remove manually added devices. Reset all devices. Resets all devices in the devices list. Devices list. Select a device in the devices list to show its settings in the right section. The following options are available at the bottom of the page for each device. Reset. Sends a reset signal to the active ASIO device and restarts the audio processing. This can solve problems with audio playback. Note. This leads to a short interruption of the playback. Apply. Applies your settings on this page. Related links. Audio system page. ASIO driver setup page. MIDI port setup page. Setting up your system. Setting up audio. Setting up audio. You must set up your audio equipment before you can use it in Cubase. Important. Make sure that all equipment is turned off before making any connections. Studio Setup Dialog. Simple stereo input and output setup. Simple stereo input and output setup. If you only use a stereo input and output from Cubase, you can connect your audio hardware, for example, the inputs of your audio card or your audio interface, directly to the input source and the outputs to a power amplifier and speaker. Setting up audio. Audio connections. Audio connections. Your system setup depends on many different factors, for example, on the kind of project that you want to create, on the external equipment that you want to use, or on the computer hardware that is available to you. Therefore, the following sections can only serve as examples. How to connect your equipment, that is, whether to use digital or analog connections, also depends on your setup. Simple stereo input and output setup. Recording levels and inputs. Recording levels and inputs. When you connect your equipment, make sure that the impedance and levels of the audio sources and inputs are matched. Using the correct type of input is important to avoid distortion or noisy recordings. For example, different inputs can be used, such as consumer line level, -10 dBV, or professional line level, +4 dB. Sometimes you can adjust input characteristics on the audio interface or on its control panel. For details, refer to the documentation that came with the audio hardware. Important. Cubase does not provide any input level adjustments for the signals that are coming into your audio hardware, since these are handled differently for each card. Adjusting input levels is either done in a special application that is included with the hardware or via its control panel. Audio connections. Word clock connections. Word clock connections. If you are using a digital audio connection, you may also need a word clock connection between the audio hardware and external devices. For details, refer to the documentation that came with the audio hardware. Important. Set up word clock synchronization correctly, or you may experience clicks and crackles in your recordings. Recording levels and inputs. Selecting an audio driver. Selecting an audio driver. By selecting an audio driver, you allow Cubase to communicate with the audio hardware. Normally, when you start Cubase, a dialog opens that prompts you to select a driver, but you can also select your audio hardware driver as described below. Note: on Windows operating systems, we recommend that you access your hardware via an ASIO driver developed specifically for the hardware. If no ASIO driver is installed, contact the manufacturer of your audio hardware for information on available ASIO drivers. If no specific ASIO driver is available, you can use the generic low-latency ASIO driver. Procedure: select Studio Setup. In the Devices list, select Audio System. Open the ASAU driver pop-up menu and select your audio hardware driver. Click OK. Word clock connections. Setting up audio hardware. Setting up audio hardware. You must select and set up your audio hardware in the Studio Setup dialog before you can use it. Prerequisite. You have selected a driver for your audio hardware. Procedure. Select Studio Setup. In the devices list, select your audio hardware driver. Do one of the following to open the control panel for your audio hardware. On Windows, click Control Panel. On macOS, click Open Config App. This button is available only for particular hardware products. If it is not available in your setup, refer to the documentation of your audio hardware. Note: the control panel is provided by the manufacturer of your audio hardware, and it is different for each audio interface brand and model. However, control panels for the generic low-latency ASAU driver, Windows only, are provided by Steinberg. Set up your audio hardware as recommended by the manufacturer. Selecting an audio driver. Audio system page. Audio system page. On the audio system page, you can select an ASAU driver for your audio hardware. To open the audio system page, select Studio Setup, and select Audio System in the devices list. The following options are available. ASAU driver allows you to select a driver. Release driver when application is in background. Releases the driver and allows other applications to play back via your audio hardware even if Cubase is running. Input latency shows the input latency of the audio hardware. Output latency shows the output latency of the audio hardware. ASAU guard latency shows the ASAU guard latency. HW sample rate shows the sample rate of your audio hardware. HW pull-up/down shows the pull-up/down status of the audio hardware. In the advanced options section, the following options are available. Reset allows you to reset the options in this section to their defaults. Processing precision allows you to set the audio processing precision to 32-bit float or 64-bit float. Depending on this setting, all channels are processed and mixed in 32-bit floating point or 64-bit floating point format. Note: a processing precision of 64-bit float can increase CPU load and memory consumption. To show all plugins that support 64-bit float processing, open the VSD plugin manager from the Studio menu and activate Show plugins that support 64-bit float processing in the Display Options pop-up menu. Note: VSD2 plugins and instruments are always processed with 32-bit precision. Activate multiprocessing allows you to distribute the processing load evenly to all available CPUs. This way, Cubase can make full use of the combined power of multiple processors. Activate ASAU guard activates the ASAU guard. This is only available if Activate multiprocessing is activated. ASAU guard level allows you to set the ASAU guard level. The higher the level, the higher the processing stability and the audio processing performance. However, higher levels also lead to increased ASAU guard latency and memory usage. Audio priority Windows only. This setting should be set to normal if you work with audio and MIDI. If you do not use MIDI at all, you can set this to boost. Activate Steinberg audio power scheme. If this option is activated, all power safe modes that have an impact on real-time processing are deactivated. Note that this is only effective for very low latencies and that it increases the power consumption. This preload allows you to specify how many seconds of audio are preloaded into RAM prior to starting playback. This allows for smooth playback. Adjust for record latency. If this option is activated, the plugin latencies are taken into account during recording. Record shift allows you to shift the recordings by the specified value. Volume automation precision allows you to set the number of samples after which a new volume automation event is processed. The automation curve between the processed events is interpolated. This smoothens transitions between automation events and prevents sudden jumps which may lead to crackles. At the bottom of the page, the following options are available. Reset sends a reset signal to the active ASAU device and restarts the audio processing. This can solve problems with audio playback. Note: this leads to a short interruption of the playback. Apply applies your settings on this page. Related links: VSD plugin manager window. Setting up audio hardware. ASAU driver setup page.